Welcome to Pankinen Financial Perspective with Ashton Pankinen from Pankinen Financial Group. Planning for your financial future means navigating challenges like market volatility, inflation, and retirement income. Pankinen Financial Perspective is here to help by addressing common financial concerns, sharing valuable strategies, and exploring ways you can work toward your financial goals. Now let's get started with Pankinen Financial Perspective.
Hello and welcome to the Pankinen Financial Perspective. My name is Ashton Pankinen from Pankinen Financial Group. If you'd like more information about what you hear during our show today, give us a call at 952-873-2703 or visit us online at pankininfinancial.com. That's PANKONIN financial.com. And while at my website, click on the radio page to check out past shows and to subscribe to our program on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or Amazon Music. Also, while on my page, click the link at the top to get the latest retirement guide. For many people, the idea of retirement feels like a balancing act of trying to enjoy the life you've built today without compromising the security of your future. And as I often tell my clients, two things can be true at once. You can spend on the things you love right now and still save effectively for your golden years. During today's show, we're going to look at how to navigate retirement planning without the guilt. We'll discuss why those small daily splurges don't have to derail your strategy and how protecting your long-term progress from the lifestyle creep, especially as you move through your 40s. But first, let me introduce my co-host, Tony Shore, whose appearance on the show is always welcome as the first day of spring.
Is that an April Fool's joke? Hopefully you
gotcha.
Well, Ashton, great to be here as always.
Yep.
As you know, I've been busy and I just got back from a trip to Nashville. I love it down there. My wife and I, the first 6 years we were married, we lived in Nashville, and that was fun.
Oh,
so
nice.
Fun to see all our old friends there. How about you? What have you been up to?
Yeah, it's funny you bring up April Fools. I just, it made me think of, we are recording on April 1st here. But this morning I told my son, I said, hey, buddy, your mom and I have been talking. It's spring break for us. Your mom and I have been talking, and you can play video games all day today. And his face lit up and he's like, really, Dad? Really? And I go, April Fools. And he's like,
oh, no. And the Mean Father of the Year award goes to, that's hilarious.
But he got me too. It was, I was laying in bed in the morning and I could feel like eyes watching me. And here he is standing at the edge of my bed. And I didn't know what he was doing. I'm like, hey, buddy, what are you up to? And he's like, nothing. And he went back to the living room. And I wake up and he's got these army men, these little green army men, like the G.I. Joe army men, and they're pointing their gun at me. And so they were shooting me when I woke up. So that was his April Fool's joke on me. So
that is awesome. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. That's great. That's great. Well, you're having fun with it. Fun with the family. I love it.
We've been good. We've got this fall, spring coming and going here in Minnesota, and hopefully it'll be here for real eventually, but yeah.
Yeah, I heard we have another winter storm coming. What's up with that?
I don't know.
Ashton, why can't you do something about that?
I can't do anything about that, Tony. Yeah.
Oh, shoot. Well, you can help us with our finances, and that's what we're talking a bit about that today. And you said, yes, you can spend during retirement. And I'm just thinking, what will my pizza buffet budget be like in retirement?
Hey, we have to build it in there. Yeah, we have to build that in there so you can have that guilt-free spending.
Yeah, my pizza consumption is that we'll probably have to make that a category and part of the plan.
A line item for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm looking forward to hearing how we can find that balance between living for today and planning for tomorrow, right?
Yeah, and so let me know before we kick off today's show that we'll be referencing a Kiplinger article, Small Splurges That Won't Derail Your Retirement. So the article nicely highlights something I think a lot of people wrestle with, especially once they get into their 40s and start thinking more seriously about that retirement. On one hand, you want to be responsible, you want to save, invest, and make sure your future is secure. But on the other hand, you also want to spend some time living your life right now. So what happens when you spend a little money on something you enjoy? Maybe it's that daily $5 cup of coffee. Maybe it's a new gadget you didn't technically need, but you really wanted. Or maybe it's something like a designer bag or special purchase to treat yourself to. A lot of people do feel guilty about those kinds of splurges, and they worry that spending that money is somehow going to derail that retirement plan 20 years down the road.
Yeah. But the truth is, it doesn't have to be that way, right?
Yeah, because two things can actually be true at the same time. You can spend money on the things you enjoy today and still have that responsibility for the future, or save responsibly for the future. And so again, it doesn't have to be one or the other. You can do both. Enjoying your money doesn't have to come at the expense of those long-term financial goals. Small splurges like dining out, taking a trip, or buying something you've had your eye on can absolutely fit into that healthy financial strategy, as long as your savings still stay on track and those choices aren't forcing you into difficult trade-offs. Where things can really start to get tricky is when splurging turns into something bigger.
Yeah. I think this is where a lot of people run into trouble, because occasionally treating yourself doesn't feel like a big deal. But, if those little treats slowly become the new normal, that's when spending can start creeping up without people even realizing it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we call the financial lifestyle creep. Lifestyle creep, when, your income goes up, your spending gradually increases. And instead of putting more additional income toward long-term savings, it gets absorbed into the more expensive day-to-day lifestyle. Another issue can be when people start dipping into retirement accounts to fund short-term spending or cover debts that came from overspending. And that's where things can really begin to erode your progress you've made over the years. For me, Tony, retirement accounts are designed to support you decades down the road. And once that money comes out early, it can be very difficult to replace the long-term growth you might have lost.
Sure. I would imagine it can. And I think it's especially important for people in their 40s to hear, because that's probably the stage of life where you're earning more than you did earlier, but you're also juggling a lot of financial priorities at that point.
Yeah, that's right. In your 40s, it's often about protecting what you've already built while still enjoying the life you worked hard to create. Again, the key isn't eliminating every indulgence or living with constant financial anxiety. It's about balance between the two. You want to make sure retirement savings stays on track, but you should also feel comfortable enjoying the money along the way. Again, live now and plan for the future. So we're going to talk about how you can strike a balance and how you can spend on the things you love while still building that strong financial future.
Yeah. So if somebody wants to enjoy their money today without feeling like they're sabotaging their future, how do they actually make that work in practice? I mean, what have you seen with that?
Yeah, great question, Tony. And it's something I often hear from clients all the time. In fact, one of the most common questions I get is some version of, can I buy this? And again, my answer is usually simple. Yes, if it comes from discretionary income. And I do appreciate when clients actually come to me ahead of time and ask that question instead of after the fact. And so, in other words, the money that's left over after the important priorities are already taken care of, that means your bills are paid, you've built up a healthy emergency fund, and your retirement contributions are happening automatically. And once these foundational pieces are in place, you have a lot more freedom to enjoy the money that remains.
Yeah. It sounds like the key is making sure the important stuff happens first, right?
Yeah, you're right. You want to save first. So when it comes to retirement savings, a solid rule of thumb is to at least contribute enough to take advantage of your employer's match. And if your workplace offers that tax advantage plan like a 401k, the employer match is essentially additional money going toward your retirement. And it's something you don't want to leave on the table. It's free money that you want to make sure you take advantage of. And once that contribution is happening consistently, it becomes much easier to think about the rest of your spending in a more structured way. One strategy that many people find helpful is something called the bucket approach.
Yeah.
The idea is to kind of divide your finances into different buckets so that each dollar has a purpose. And when you do that, it becomes much easier to see that money is available for spending and what money needs to stay focused on long-term goals. So that first bucket, we call it is fixed expenses. This is where the essentials live. Think of it like rent or mortgage, car payments, utilities, insurance, whether that's home or vehicle, groceries, and just all those other regular bills. This bucket also includes your retirement contributions because saving for your future is one of those non-negotiable priorities. And these are expenses that keep your life running both today and in the years ahead.
So that bucket you're talking about is basically the foundation then.
Yeah, you're right. It's a financial base that supports everything else. The second bucket we look at is your emergency fund. We often suggest keeping somewhere around 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses set aside here. That money acts as a safety net if something unexpected happens, like maybe a job change, major repair like furnace goes out, something like that, or any other surprise expense. Having that emergency fund in place can help you avoid relying on high interest credit cards or expensive loans when life throws you that curveball. Because once your fixed expenses are covered and you've got your emergency fund in good shape, you can move into that third bucket. And this is one the people usually like the most, Tony. That's the splurge bucket, or your discretionary spending. You can spend that money however you want. If you take a trip, buy a new phone, upgrade your laptop, treat yourself to something special, this is where that spending can come from. And if the money's already there and you have it earmarked for that bucket, you can enjoy that purchase without guilt because the rest of your financial plan is still intact.
Sure. Yeah. And you know what? I think it's really good to have that. And the idea isn't necessarily then to eliminate splurges. I can still hit the pizza buffet pretty hard.
Yeah. Record studio, all that.
The record stores. Yep. And it's just to plan for them ahead as long as it's part of the plan, right?
Yeah, that's it. Where people tend to run into trouble is when those splurges happen unexpectedly and get put on that credit card without a clear path of how to pay them off. That's when spending can start creating stress instead of enjoyment. But when those purchases come out of your discretionary bucket or money that we've already set aside for that purpose, you can enjoy them without feeling like you've done something financially irresponsible. Let's say someone brings home about $8,000 per month after taxes. Their fixed monthly expenses for things like housing, utilities, insurance, groceries, regular savings total about $4,000 a month. In that case, the fixed bucket would take up $4,000, and that means the essentials are covered and your retirement saving goals are already built into that part of the plan. And then let's say another $2,000 goes to the emergency bucket. Now that exact amount someone puts into there will depend on where they're at in building that emergency fund. And that's that 3 to 6 month safety net we talked about earlier. And if someone's still working towards that goal, they might prioritize adding more to that bucket for a while. But once these two buckets are taken care of, that still leaves $2,000 available for the splurge bucket. That's money you could use for travel, hobbies, dining out, technology upgrades, or whatever brings you enjoyment. And the key point is that if the first two buckets are already covered, that spending doesn't have to come with guilt because it's the important financial priorities have already been addressed.
Right. Now, what about those moments, though, when extra money shows up, like a tax refund or a bonus or maybe your raise?
Yeah, those moments can actually be powerful opportunities to strengthen your financial strategy. If your discretionary spending is already comfortably covered, it can be wise to direct those windfalls toward your longer-term goals instead. For example, that tax refund or bonus could go towards boosting your retirement savings or help you finish building that emergency fund. Raises is another big one. When income increases, it can be a good time to increase your retirement contribution rate as well.
That's what I do. I automatically, if I get, let's say I get a 4% raise, I increase what I'm putting into my 401k by 4%.
Yeah, that way, the raise goes towards strengthening your retirement future instead of just quietly disappearing into that higher day-to-day spending or that lifestyle creep.
Right. Keep it out of the general fund where it's going to disappear. Oof. And
exactly.
It's gone. And it's gone. Yep.
Yeah. So again, being intentional with those increases in income can make a big difference over time. And really the whole conversation comes down to being intentional about how you spend and how you save. The goal isn't to eliminate enjoyment from your financial life. It's to create structure where you can enjoy your money today without putting that future security at risk. If the bucket approach feels too much structure, the most important thing is to simply have a budget and stick to it.
Yeah.
And however some people organize their finances, the key is just knowing where you can truly afford or what you can truly afford before making that big purchase. If it wasn't something currently in the budget, one option is to set aside a little from each paycheck until you have enough saved to pay for it comfortably. That way you can still enjoy the purchase when it comes time without relying on debt or putting stress on the rest of your financial strategy.
Right. Okay. So before we keep going with our conversation, let our listeners out there know, Ashton, how they can schedule that no-charge consultation with you to ask questions or get more information.
Yeah, the best way to do it is just give our office a call, 952-873-2703. Again, that number is 952-873-2703. 873-2703. Visit our website, pankoninfinancial.com. That's PANKONIN financial.com. Scheduling a consultation only takes a few minutes, and we're always happy to work around your schedule.
All right. Well, hey, I know that we want to keep things rolling here. You had a second article you had told me about before the show that you wanted to touch on.
Yeah, it's another Kiplinger article. Are you a retirement millionaire too afraid to spend? So if you built up a sizable nest egg, but are nervous to enjoy some of it, there are 6 solid steps you can make to be able to overcome those feelings.
Yeah. And I would imagine that hesitation makes sense. I mean, after decades of saving, people probably get very used to being careful with their money.
Absolutely. Many people spend their entire working lives being disciplined savers, and it's hard to turn on that spending. They build the habits around being cautious with money, delaying purchases, and then prioritizing the future. And then retirement arrives and suddenly the plan shifts. Instead of saving and accumulating, the goal becomes using that money to support the life you want to live. And that can really require a big mindset shift. One of the first steps is recognizing that the whole purpose of saving all those years was so you could eventually use that money. The nest egg isn't just there to sit untouched forever. It's there to support your lifestyle once you're no longer working. And one way to make that shift easier is to connect your money to a purpose. For example, maybe you've saved so you could travel more, spend more time with family, or help your children or grandchildren with major life milestones, whether that's weddings, college. And when people connect their money to those kinds of meaningful goals, spending it often feels much more comfortable.
Yeah, and that makes sense because when money is tied to something meaningful, it doesn't feel like wasting it then.
Yeah, that's the idea. It feels like using it the way it was intended. Another important step is being intentional about how much you actually plan to spend in retirement. One way we describe retirement is like climbing a mountain. During your working years, you're building wealth and you're working your way toward the summit to the point to which you've accumulated enough to retire. And then once you reach that peak, your journey changes. Instead of climbing upward, you begin descending down the mountain as you gradually draw down your savings to support that lifestyle. And Tony, for many people, that shift can feel uncomfortable. The balance in their accounts may slowly decline over time. And even if everything is going according to plan, that's why it can be helpful to determine in advance how much you're comfortable spending each year and how much you ultimately want to leave behind for family, charity, or other goals. Having those numbers clearly defined can really give you the confidence to enjoy the money that remains.
Yeah, and that's good because I assume this is where having a strategy becomes important then.
Yeah, that's spot on there, Tony. Once you reach retirement, it's not about how much you've saved. It's about how you withdraw those funds. Many retirees have money in multiple accounts. Could be IRAs, 401ks, Roth IRAs, non-qualified brokerage accounts. And each of those accounts can have different tax considerations and eventually require minimum distributions may come into play as well for those traditional IRAs. So that's why developing a thoughtful strategy can make a big difference. Some approaches are designed to help retirees adjust their spending based on market conditions, while others focus on the essential expenses and make sure those are always covered first. The goal is to create a system that provides both structure and confidence so you can feel comfortable spending without constantly worrying about whether you're making a mistake.
Right. And I know that another big piece of this is market volatility, right? It really can add another layer of anxiety for people in retirement.
It certainly can, and when markets are choppy, and I know we've had some of that this first quarter here, some retirees are instinctively want to pull back on spending out of fear their savings might not last. And that's why testing different scenarios with financial strategy can be so valuable. For example, we look at what happens if markets have a rough year, what happens if returns are lower than expected for a certain period of time. And if your financial strategy can withstand those types of scenarios, it can give you confidence to continue enjoying retirement without overreacting to short-term market movements. A lot of times we send clients enough guaranteed income between Social Security and their investments here to cover those basic needs so they don't have to worry about what market fluctuation does. I always joke maybe instead of going to Jamaica, you go to Branson for your winter vacation.
Right. Right.
If,
Branson, Jamaica. It's
same thing.
It's really the same thing.
If
I know people who have had a blast in Branson.
For sure. Yeah. Probably is a little more cost effective though than the
sure.
Tropical vacation. But
sure.
If the plan shows potential challenges, it just simply means it may be time to make some adjustments.
Well, really, it all comes back to planning again, which is the theme you've been talking about throughout the entire show today, right, Ashton?
Yeah, planning creates possibility. Another helpful idea is creating what some people call permission to spend budget. In other words, if travel is something you've always wanted to do in retirement, include that in your financial strategy. If helping family members is important to you, plan for that as well. When these goals are already built into your strategy, spending that money doesn't feel reckless. It simply feels like you're following through with the strategy we've created. Retirement tends to unfold in phases. Early on, people often have the most energy and most interest in travel, hobbies, and new experiences. And as time goes on, spending patterns often change naturally. So if someone spends those early years being overly cautious and holding back on things they wanted to do, they may miss the opportunities that can't easily be recreated later. And that's why it's important, Tony, to remember that retirement isn't just about preserving money. It's also about making the most out of the time you have. So if you've built that solid foundation, have a thoughtful strategy in place, the goal should be to use those resources to support the life you've worked so hard to create.
Yeah. Well, and today's takeaway might be a little reassuring for people listening. You don't have to feel guilty about enjoying your money as long, once again, it's part of the strategy and part of the plan.
Yeah. And I agree with you. Saving for the future is important, but the purpose of saving is to eventually support the life you want. You want that clear vision, intentional spending, the right strategy. It can often lead to a healthy balance between protecting the future and enjoying the present. And, one of the things we talk about is those early years. Tony, we talk about the go-go years. Again, we mentioned that that's when you're younger and healthier, maybe have a little more ambition for travel. And then later on, we've got those no-go years. So again, the spending may decrease just because you're not as mobile as you were, in your 90s versus your 60s or 70s in retirement.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important to really have a plan and work with somebody like yourself. When we talk about this, I know we say it a lot and people are like, all they say on the show is plan and strategize and plan. You need a strategy. You need a plan. What does that mean for me? Right.
Yeah.
Well, everybody's situation is different and you need to be educated in why this is so important.
For sure.
And permission to spend is something I bet you've had clients, Ashton, that where they get into retirement and they won't, even if they have enough money, they won't take a trip. They don't want to spend anything extra. I just, I don't know if I can afford to get, we've got to really hang on to our money because they're so paranoid about it or so used to not touching that money and not having, I guess the number one concern, I've heard it over and over, is running out of money in retirement.
For sure. Yeah. People are more worried about that than death. That's a larger concern of running out of money than of dying.
Than actually passing in retirement. It's running out of money is the number one fear, they say. In every study and survey that has been done, that's what the number one fear retirees have.
For sure.
So you've probably seen both ends, though. When people first retire, they either overspend or they don't want to spend a thing. Am I right in that?
Yeah. And, and it's really, really hard to flip that switch from saver to spender.
Right.
And some of these people grew up in hard times and, they saved their whole life and now it's time to spend. And so again, I try and do a really good job with my clients to help flip that switch. And sometimes it's sending them a guaranteed income stream. This is your fun money. This is your, hey, I know you don't need this, cause we're already getting Social Security and your pension and other things, to cover those basic needs, that first bucket of needs, whether that's, insurance costs, mortgages. And then we say, I'm going to start sending you $2,000 a month. And this is your fun money, make sure you spend this too. And it gives them that permission to know that, hey, we're not going to run out of money. Ashton, we made a plan for this. And so now it's guilt-free spending. And so it's a little easier to do that. But I joke that my job's a psychologist a lot of times. And again,
sure. Yeah, marriage counseling,
yeah.
Psychologist.
Yeah, exactly. And so again, we can have that conversation with the individuals like, hey, you are going to be okay if we spend this money. And, and we talk about goals for the money, and that helps with the spending too. And so, some people get in those no-go years and maybe they haven't spent as much as they thought they would. And so now they've got a pretty good nest egg that they're going to leave to their kids, but they want to be able to watch their kids enjoy it now. And so we put together some gifting strategies as well. Because, if you don't gift it now, it's going to go to the kids eventually anyways. And to be able to see them enjoy that, the kids and grandkids enjoy the money. Maybe it's a big family trip you take with the money, that kind of thing. Again, we give them that permission and we give them that purpose to match their goals with their spending, and it makes it a little easier.
Yeah. Permission to spend.
Yeah.
That's basically what this show is about. And of course, you can take that too far. Some people retire and they've talked to you about it. And then they retire and they go, hey, we need to pull $100,000 out of that, out of our money that's in the markets, or our 401k and IRA. And you're like, wait, what? This wasn't in the plan.
That wasn't what we talked about.
Yeah. We there's a used RV we're going to buy. It's $100,000. It's a nice one. And,
so I do have both ends of the spectrum. Usually again, we have that conversation, and it's somebody that wants to retire maybe a little early compared to what they thought they were. And so they want to retire at 62. And then we kind of say, well, it's going to be a little tight if we do that. And then they kind of evaluate and they decide, hey, let's wait till 65 like we had in our plan. And maybe we get some unusual market returns or, an inheritance or something, and things change. But again, they also don't want to feel strapped because that biggest fear is running out of money in retirement.
There you go. Well, great show today. We're out of time. Listeners and viewers, tell them, Ashton, how they can get a hold of you and set up that no-charge consultation.
Yeah. And again, we talked about the peak here. And if you're getting close to that peak or you're coming down the mountain, it's important to reach out and make sure we have a plan in place. So if you have questions about retirement, your financial strategy, visit my website, pankinenfinancial.com. That's PANKONIN financial.com. Call my office, 952-873-2703. Again, that number is 952-873-2703. We'd love to help you protect your savings and feel confident about the road ahead.
Sounds great. Really, Ashton, great show. Listeners and viewers, thanks for tuning in. That does it for today's episode of the Pankinen Financial Perspective with our host, Ashton Pankin.
Thank you for joining us for Pankinen Financial Perspective. Don't head into retirement without a plan for both your finances and your health. For more information, contact Ashton Pankinen at Pankinen Financial Group at 952-873-2703 or visit PankinenFinancialGroup.com. Join us again soon for another episode of Pankinen Financial Perspective. Advisory services are offered by Ashton Pankinen LLC DBA Pankinen Financial Group, an investment advisor in the state of Minnesota.
All matters discussed during the show are for informational purposes only. Each individual situation may vary, and the opinions expressed here may not apply to everyone. Materials presented are believed to be from reliable sources, and no representations can be made as to its accuracy. All ideas and information should be discussed in detail with one of our qualified representatives prior to implementation. We are not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration, the Federal Medicare Program, or any other government agency. Calling this number will direct you to a licensed sales agent.